So everyone has time to write, but not everyone has the same amount of time. And that's completely okay. Having all the time in the world does not necessarily mean that you're going to write more or better. Sometimes when you have too much time, it just makes it seem like, oh, you have plenty of time to do the laundry and walk the dog and maybe make a fancy meal for dinner and who knows what else. Whereas when you have very small amounts of time, you may be so focused that you actually get a lot more done. It really varies. For people who have very busy lives outside of writing and need to find little bits of writing time, I totally hear you. That's how my life was for a long time. When I wrote my first book, I had a baby, I had a full-time job. So I wrote while I was nursing. I wrote while I was waiting for experiments to finish in my lab. I wrote in every type of moving vehicle. And I didn't stop having a day job until after I sold 10 books. And so now that I don't have another job, obviously I have a lot more time to write. But I still find those little times because sometimes the best time to write is while I'm just sitting in the car while my daughter's at softball practice because nothing else is happening. Nothing's trying to distract me. There's nothing else I can be doing. And so every little bit of time that you can use is going to help and is going to add up to being more prolific. But I want to emphasize, and I cannot emphasize this enough, that I don't think you should sacrifice self-care for writing time. Self-care is so important to being a creative person because you can't be creative or productive if you're exhausted and burned out. So for me, I need a lot of sleep. I have always been a person who needed a lot of sleep. And when I'm well rested, I can get so much done in 30 minutes. Whereas if I'm exhausted, I could have a whole day where I get nothing done. So I always prioritize sleep and I prioritize spending time outside. I prioritize exercise, which fortunately I can usually combine with spending time outside. I prioritize spending time with friends. And actually, I can combine all three of those when I go for a walk with a friend. So I try to do that several times a week. And for you, self-care may look totally different than this. You may like to take bubble baths and watch Netflix and whatever it is. I'm just saying, please don't give that up for writing time because you are not going to be able to put your heart into your writing if you don't have any heart left. You need to take care of yourself first. And that goes directly to this, which is cut yourself slack when you need it. I have had 2 years, well, all of us have had 2 years where we needed a lot of slack, but my dad actually died right before COVID hit, possibly of COVID. We don't really know because they didn't do an autopsy, but he had a virus and died really suddenly. And my mom and my brother had already passed away. So I was in charge of all of my dad's affairs, which is, if you haven't done this, a tremendous amount of work. And then COVID came along. All of my kids were home all the time. And so for the last 2 years, there have been so many days when I just couldn't do anything productive. I just felt I was completely tapped out. And we all have days like that. And I certainly don't want to pretend that I'm the person who can write through everything. That's certainly not true. So a few tips for if you have young kids and you're trying to get some writing done, try writing with them. If you give them a lot of supplies to write, depending on their age, you can write while they write. You can also write together. My kids really liked doing add-on stories where I would do a sentence, they would do a sentence, or I would do a word, they would do a word, or we would do, each person starts with a drawing and then you pass it and then you write what you think the drawing is and you fold it and then you just see the sentence and you draw it again. It's like a Pictionary telephone. So all of those I would do with my kids, and sometimes they would spark ideas that later I would end up turning into my own stories. I think it's helpful to figure out what your non-writing priorities are because there's just not time for everything. So what are you going to say yes to and what are you going to say no to? And hopefully you can say no to more things than you say yes to. So for me, as I said, I say yes to sleep and exercise and friends. I say no to basically every kind of household task. So my house is pretty much a total disaster all the time, but I've just accepted that. For other people, priorities will be different, but so long as you figure out what is really worth your time and what isn't. That'll help you have more time for your writing. So writer's block, this is something that I get asked about a lot. And one thing that I do myself is if I'm blocked on one project, I work on a different one. I always say, don't be afraid to send a project off to your critique partners, even if it's absolutely awful. You could also just talk it through with a critique partner over the phone, because just getting ideas from other people can jumpstart a project that isn't working and get you past that writer's block. And if you really don't have the energy or headspace to work on a book, then that's a good time to do those writing adjacent activities like critiquing and reading, and my favorite, brainstorming. So brainstorming is, I think, one of the best ways to get through writer's block. You can brainstorm lists of characters that you would like to put in a book. You can brainstorm lists of nonfiction topics you would like to write about. Maybe you want to brainstorm lists of problems a character could encounter, or brainstorm lists of settings that intrigue you, or brainstorm titles. I've had so many books that started with the title. And the thing about brainstorming is either it's going to help you in the future because you're going to have all these lists to go back to and get inspired by in the future. Even better, it might inspire you right then. A lot of times I'll be brainstorming because I just couldn't get excited about anything to work on. And then something will excite me and there I'll go off on writing a new first draft. So I'm a huge fan of brainstorming. And if you can't do it by yourself, ask some writer friends and brainstorm together. Another thing that is helpful is taking the pressure off of yourself, because if you were sitting and someone had a gun to your head and said, okay, write a picture book draft now, obviously that would be the worst situation for being creative. So if you're feeling blocked, try writing something that's not a story. Write a letter, write an email. Sometimes it's helpful to write a poem with a really strict form, because when you're following rules, it can make you feel less pressure to be creative. Maybe write a letter to your kid that could be read sometime in the future. Another thing you could do is try drawing something instead of writing. You may have absolutely no artistic skills. It doesn't really matter. The idea is just that maybe you're going to doodle something that makes you think, oh, wait, I have an idea now. You could try sketching a comic strip also. And who knows, that could be the beginning of a graphic novel. So another very important thing is to always have new ideas ready to work on. And so that's where I'm saying that brainstorming is going to help your future self, because if you do a lot of brainstorming, then you will always have those ideas when you need them.